question is, what do we mean by the intellect? So I feel like Plato was my gateway drug. Um, I probably the thing that I read that blew my mind the most as a young person was my parents sent me off to summer school one summer to like get me out of town and keep me safe from my boyfriend. So literally that was their thinking. So I went to the summer school and read Plato, and I read Kant's Prolegomena of Future Metaphysics, or whatever it's Prolegomena to any future metaphysics, and Plato's Meno, which is the Kant I kind of understood, but the Plato I really got, and it blew my mind because the Meno is all about Plato sort of demonstrating the ways in which whatever we know we already knew. So it's the example where he brings a slave forward, and he has the slave demonstrate that the slave can do a perfect geometric proof, can really understand, like, oh yeah, right, that's the truth of geometry, and is knowledge that education reveals that you already have, but not something that somehow education implants in you.
Right.
And so that idea that somehow we can understand the truth of universal forms, and that transcends class, it transcends gender, and it transcends any of the divisions that we make that divide out one human from another. That really blew my mind. I was a 16-year-old. I was like, wow. So I think that when I talk about the power of education, or when I think about the ability of the intellect to unlock the truth, I come back to that way in which there's something that isn't taught, that isn't in some sense imparted, and yet if someone doesn't bring that out, you don't even know you have it. But I feel like what Socrates is continually throwing us back upon is our capacity to think about our own thinking, and in doing that, to uncover stuff that we do know is true, but also to uncover a lot of mystery, the stuff we don't know. And it's really, the ability to think back onto our thinking. This is also at the heart of Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism, and Dzogchen too. The luminosity of mind from a Buddhist sense is that self-illuminating that happens when, instead of my imagining that I can reach out with my ideas and grab the world and stabilize it, I just bring my awareness back to that reaching itself, that capacity for my mind to kind of scan experience. And I don't try to settle on any definitive shape for what experience is or what it means. I don't try to dig underneath my experience to find its fundamental bedrock meaning with a capital M. Instead, I just notice that my mind is such that it illuminates the world. And I think the Socratic method, which is basically sort of, I state something, you say, well, how do you know that? Pointing yourself back to calling that into question. You do reach a point where there are some things that are clear. And those things that are clear are things like geometry, things like, take it forward into Kant, which I think is probably why in that class I took when I was 16, why we were reading Kant and Plato, the things that are, a priori true, the things that I don't have to figure out from experience, but, if someone says, does 2 equal 2, I say, yes, it does. I know that. That ability for my mind to reflect back on its own knowing is the place where I do figure out the things that I actually do know. But they're not things like, the sky is blue, people are good, God exists. They're things like 2 equals 2. I trained as an interfaith medical chaplain, and in that work, I saw people die, and since then my mother passed away in 2014, so that's the first time I've been with someone that I love, as they're physically passing. And and the experience of being a chaplain was realizing that, you know, if I'm going to be there in this, if I'm going to be present for this thing, death, and think that I have anything to contribute to the moment, like any understanding, any comfort, that's ridiculous. It's so much bigger than me, and so this is not. I think experientially what I recognized was that this isn't about me in the finite sense of, you know, Lisa, Miobin, Freinkel. This isn't about me. Like, whatever I think I am inadequate to the great mysteries. So that was interesting to just, like, you know, especially as an academic, where so much of my training and the way I've been groomed is to think that I have all of this ability and knowledge and it's in me, like I'm smart, I can write well, I can teach well, or whatever. And to, like, that's ridiculous. I don't, there's nothing that I have in me that makes me equal to, you know, the great matter of birth and death. That's one side of it. The other side of it is, like, thank God. You know, thank God it's not on my shoulders. This is, you know, it's bigger than me, but I'm also bigger than me. And I think this is where, you know, the great philosophers who realize that thinking is bigger than, like, individuals using their brain power. Mind is bigger than brain power. It's a little bit like that realization that this is, if this were simply about, like, wow, that Plato, that Socrates, he was a really smart guy. Like, you know, that if that's what philosophy was about, like individual smart people,
be pretty lame.
It would be pretty lame. Yeah.
What about personally your own death?
Practice, in the sense of Buddhist practice, which I think of as being all about mind, I think that has been, that is fundamentally about the truth of impermanence, and just recognizing, you know, grasping and aversion and how that causes suffering, and, you know, what ultimately are we grasping? We're grasping for this, like, the continued moment by moment comfort of this body, heart, mind. I mean, that's what you know, whatever I'm holding on to, it's because I'm trying to hold on as me. And to, in a visceral experiential level, to realize that effort to hold on only brings me suffering. Okay, well then, to not suffer actually means not holding on, which, you know, that means that I'm encountering my death continually, moment by moment, in a real way. But if I were knowingly in the process of dying right now, I would hold on and scream and kick like a motherfucker, because, you know, that's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I grasp, I hold on. So my karma is, you know, generations back, is depression and melancholy. Like, that is, you know, like, I am a woman, I'm 5'3", I have melancholy. And moment, you know, I have, my skin tends to get itchy. I mean, there are, like, things that are just, like, true about this body, mind, heart. So in the same ways that I deal with being relatively short and being a woman and having itchy skin and suffer, you know, I suffer from melancholy. Now, you know, will I reach a point where where I'm like Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm just like, the man always seems to have a little smile on his face? I don't know. Did he have depression? I don't know. He certainly has had quite an intense life and lots of things in his life that would create suffering. To me, it's not about a state of joy. It's about the ease with which I inhabit my karma, and the ways in which the ups and downs are, you know, they're the waves, you know, and I ride them. So over the course of my practice, I would say I go through periods where I don't care sounds a little bit disrespectful. I guess it's none of my business sounds disrespectful too, but there's a kind of way in which, like, really, do you really want to worry about that? Like, this is your karma. Like, you know, you inhabit this body, heart, and mind, this brain chemistry, this is what you inhabit. This is what you were born into. So, you know, you can, oh no, this is horrible. And sometimes it feels like that's like, well, that's interesting. Like, okay. And it's not like I'm apart from my experience and watching it, but it's just sort of like, there's something so, I guess I have a lot of compassion for the struggle that I probably will have throughout this incarnation with things like depression. Like it's like, oh yeah, that's part of it. Just like I have compassion with that I live in an aging body, in an imperfect, you know, this goes back to the issue about death. It's like I have compassion for myself for like how hard that is to have this human life. And lately, these days, I've seen the ways in which the stuff that maybe when I started practicing, I thought, well, practicing will make me not a depressive. That impulse.
Practicing Zen Buddhism?
Yeah, practicing Zen Buddhism will make me somehow, you know, it'll be like, here's my new Prozac, you know. Meditation is antidepressant. It's like, and I know that there are people for whom actually, you know, daily meditation practice is a mood enhancement. And sometimes I feel that. Sometimes it feels like, yeah, I feel so much better. And sometimes I don't feel better, you know. It's one of my Dharma siblings was articulating it, who also suffers from depression. He's like, you know, the world is full of hustle and bustle, and depression is like this, no, I don't want to. It's this sort of spirit of resistance to the doing, churning of a world that's constantly trying to get ahead, and that feeling of, no, I'm staying right here. There's a way in which depression reveals some of the pretenses and the self-aggrandizements the ways we prop things up, and depression cuts right underneath it and says, no, that's not real. So it's a spiritual gift, and that's not something that I saw 10 years ago. You know, that was not an, there's no, if someone had said to me, well, your depression is a spiritual gift, I would have, you know, I would not have been very pleased with that comment. So this is a long way of saying that I have not found that my practice has brought me to joy. To clarity, more clarity. Like where I am now with this is, wow, what a spiritual gift to see the ways in which being a bodhisattva and having a vow to save all beings, there's a way in which, you know, my depression isn't even mine. It's about being vulnerable to the suffering of the world. At the time, in November and December, it was like, oh my God, there's no way out. Like it really was this feeling of there is no way out, because I can make myself feel better, but Trump is still our president, you know? And that was, I had never, I can't, I mean, that feeling of there being no way out was so powerful. And, you know, and it faded because, you know, like there's only so long, I think, you can live in that space of there's no way out, where you don't like start to go, oh, okay, there's some hope somewhere. Well, because any truth that we hold on to as our truth is a partial truth. So, I mean, I'm not just a literature person, I'm a comparative literature person, and I think my whole, in that kind of academic context, my mindset is very comparative, you know, and even like my work as a chaplain, I'm a, you know, although I'm a Zen Buddhist and I'm ordained, it's like what really floats my boat is interfaith work, so working across different traditions and seeing those resonances and also the divergences. And the minute you start to learn more than one language, and I'm not really fluent in anything but English, but I'm like proficient in a whole bunch of languages, and then you start to think, okay, well, this is how they say it in French, and this is how they say it in German, and this is how they say it in Italian, this is how they say it in Japanese, and you start to see like how, triangulating or like, moving across all of those different coordinates for something that's kind of seems really similar, but it's differently, like just a simple word like the word for, I don't know, for handbag or something, but all these different nuances and like, well, this is what they think a handbag is in Germany, and then in France, you start to realize that like, and this is very Platonic, like the truth of handbag is not captured in any one of these human forms, but it is kind of captured in each of them. And together, like the more we know, the more like we build this world of like human grasping for ideas and understanding, the more we sort of see that as like little fragments of some great whole, the more we realize the HOLE, the whole in the middle of those fragments that actually no human idea grasps, because they all embrace it. So to me, there's just this very deep way in which the more we engage with humans and the way humans try to make sense of things, there's always that little bit of sadness, because every way we try to make sense of something, we're missing something. But then there's also that like beauty of like, oh, the more I see it the way you see it, together now we're like a little bit, we've embraced a little bit more this huge mystery that falls out of any one particular thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But there's always a kind of, there's always going to be, we're always getting it and missing it at the same time. And there's a kind of sweetness to that and a kind of sadness to that. It's like we see the truth out of the corner of our eye, and we're never going to be able to look directly at it because it's not one thing, but it's moving all around us. And so if we're okay with just seeing it out of the corner of our eye, well, that's huge. This is something that I've been thinking about and feeling my way into more and more, which is that all of these ways in which humans make meaning, we're always kind of making connections among, like, you never, I don't know how to say this. It's like you couldn't ever have a language that is just one word. Like, that's not a language. A language
Right.
is all these words that refer to each other and cross-reference, and and so when we humans try to make sense of things, we're always making connections. It's always about, we're connecting this with this. We never just have one data point, and that provides meaning. And that's really cool, because it means that there's this process of connecting that is how we humans try to grab onto our world. And so it's always relational. Everything is always about relationships. It's relationships with things, with humans, with other beings, with things that can't be seen or felt, but it's always relational.